Have you ever heard of a battle where a complete, total loss somehow becomes a legendary victory? It sounds like a contradiction, right? Well, that is the incredible story of the Alamo, a moment that didn't just define a battle, but an entire revolution.
Victory or death? These are the chilling, defiant words from the Texan commander, William B. Travis. He wrote this while he and his men were surrounded, hopelessly outnumbered. He knew exactly what he was up against, and he was drawing a line in the sand.
So you have to ask yourself, what pushes someone to make that kind of choice, to stare down certain death and not blink? To understand that, we've got to go back and see the impossible situation they were trapped in. Okay, so let's set the scene for this legendary standoff. We're heading back to 1836, to a place that would become famous for all the wrong and all the right reasons, the Alamo.
So here are the basics. We're in San Antonio de Bexar, in late February of 1836. Tensions had been boiling over for a while between American settlers in Texas and the Mexican government. On one side, you've got the Texan rebels, led by William Travis and the famous James Bowie. And on the other, the massive Mexican army, led by the formidable General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna himself.
And here's the thing about the Alamo. It wasn't even built to be a fort. It was an old Spanish mission. But when the rebellion kicked off, it became this makeshift fortress, a symbol of defiance, really the last line of defense for this small group of men.
And when I say small group, I mean it. This was a true David versus Goliath situation. We're talking about maybe 185 Texans up against an army of around 4,000 professional soldiers. The odds weren't just bad, they were non-existent.
So how on earth did this tiny force manage to hold out for so long? Let's take a look at the siege itself. 13 days that would go down in history.
13 days. For almost 2 weeks, this incredibly small band of rebels held off an entire army. Every single day they held out was another day they hoped, they prayed, that reinforcements would arrive.
It was during this siege that Commander William Travis wrote that famous letter. It was a desperate plea for help, and he addressed it to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world. And it's in this letter he makes that powerful vow of victory or death.
And inside those mission walls were some truly legendary figures. You had William Travis, just 26 years old, leading the whole thing. There was James Bowie, the famous frontiersman known for his massive knife. And maybe the most famous of all, Davy Crockett, a former congressman who was basically a living legend at the time.
But after those 13 days, their time ran out. In the pre-dawn hours of March 6th, General Santa Anna had had enough. He ordered a final, all-out assault on the Alamo.
The battle itself was over, but the story, the legend of the Alamo, that was just getting started. So let's look at how this absolute military disaster was somehow turned into a story of immortal victory.
Let's be perfectly clear. From a military point of view, this was a catastrophe, a complete wipeout. The fort was taken, and every single one of the defenders inside, all 185 of them, was killed.
So, if everyone died, how do we even know what happened? Well, the story was carried out by a handful of survivors, mostly women and children. The most famous was Susanna Dickinson. Santa Anna actually let her go, sending her to tell the main Texan general, Sam Houston, what had happened. And that news, instead of crushing the Texan spirit, did the exact opposite. It lit a fire. Remember, the Alamo became this incredibly powerful rallying cry. It wasn't just a slogan. It stood for courage, for sacrifice, for fighting back no matter how impossible the odds.
And over the years, as you can imagine, the story grew. History and legend started to blur together. You have these epic tales like William Travis drawing a line in the sand with his sword, or James Bowie, sick with pneumonia, fighting from his cot. We don't know if these things actually happened, but they show how this event was transformed into a powerful American myth.
Because here's the bottom line. Their sacrifice worked. Just a few weeks later, at the Battle of San Jacinto, a fired-up Texan army shouting, "Remember the Alamo," completely crushed Santa Anna's forces. They won Texas its independence. So in the end, the devastating defeat at the Alamo led directly to the ultimate victory.
Which really leaves us with this one last thought. It wasn't the battle that the Texans won. It was the story. So what is it that turns a military loss into an immortal victory? Is it the raw courage, the power of the symbol, or is it the inspiration that story gives to everyone who hears it later? The story of the Alamo tells us it's probably all three.